Hi, I'm Skinny Cheeks. In this video, I'll be covering some of the Week 3 combat changes on the PTS. Most of what we'll go through will be nerfs, and while all of them are not necessarily a bad thing, I don't really agree with the direction we're going with a lot of this. So in this video, I'll go through all the combat changes and do a bit of constructive ranting. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll begin with the proc set adjustments. So I went through and tested the DPS sets last week, but looks like we're gonna need to go through them again. They adjusted the stat values we need to reach in order for the procs to match up or pass what we're currently seeing in the Flames of Ambition patch. So sets that use weapon and spell damage now require 65-74 of either in order to reach their original values, up from 54-78. Sets that use magicka or stamina now require 39-901 of either in order to reach their original values, up from 38-350. Sets that use health now require 43-968 to reach their original values, up from 38-350. And then finally, physical and resistance now requires 30-680 of either, up from 27-890. So if you saw my previous video on the proc sets, these were tested with that original 54-78 weapon and spell damage value, so all the numbers on that will be coming down slightly. So here's the overall issue that all of this is trying to deal with. Proc sets are not great in PvE, and proc sets are overpowered in PvP. This scaling is an interesting idea, but ultimately it doesn't solve the problem in my opinion. This will heavily punish players in PvE that are using these sets, unless they're in very organized trial groups that can help push the weapon and spell damage values up insanely high. For 95% of the player base though, when running dungeons or overland content, you aren't going to hit these numbers, and you're going to be seeing a big decrease in damage from these proc sets. It just feels like this change is missing the mark a bit. And I know ZOS typically doesn't like to balance PvP and PvE separately, and they only put things into the battle spirit mechanic when they really feel like they must, but I think the answer to procs, the only answer that is really going to work well for both PvE and PvP, is to balance them separately. Maybe let them crit, but Battle Spirit takes away proc set's ability to crit. Then even if you reduce their base damage, the procs would still hit harder in PvE due to them being able to crit. Maybe this isn't the perfect solution either, but I definitely think the answer lies in a separate balance between game modes. They don't have to function differently or proc with different chances or conditions, just different values depending on if you're in PvE or PvP. I think this would be a much healthier way to go and allow for people to enjoy them across all game modes. They did specifically nerf some PvP problematic sets as well to coincide with these scaling changes, and with some of these it just hammers home the previous point even more. So we'll start with Merciless Charge. This is the Maelstrom two-hander. They reduced the damage of the set by 33%. This set is not at all overperforming in PvE, this is purely a PvP adjustment. In fact, when testing this set on the PTS with the previous scaling values, it only added about 2500 DPS. And that isn't awful, but compared to other arena weapon options, definitely one of the least enticing sets to run for PvE. Now, not only do you need more weapon damage to scale it up, it gets a flat 33% nerf too. So yeah, if you're only in PvP, then fine, this is probably a win. But for those using it in PvE, already using something that wasn't quite as good as the other options, now you are even worse off. Again, these procs just need separate adjustments for the game modes. I feel really bad for those enjoying this set in some of the more off-meta PvE builds to get such a heavy nerf to it. Crimson Twilight was nerfed by 44%. This set is mostly only used in PvP anyways, and has been at the top of their complaint list for quite a bit now, so not really much to say about this one from a PvE perspective. Same with Explosive Rebuke. This was another one that was getting some pretty nutty tooltips. It has been reduced by 42%, and the burning status effect added to it as a secondary function. Icy Conjurer will now tick every 2 seconds instead of every 1 second. Looks like the overall damage over the duration will be unchanged though, just a different tick frequency. So Unleashed Terror, a 46% nerf here, again due to PvP reasons, not overperforming in PvE. I know some people paired it with the Maelstrom two-hander in some of those off-meta setups, so it will be interesting to see how much of that 46% nerf is made up by those constant hemorrhaging ticks that they added in. Again though, just a shame to see such a heavy nerf when it's only overperforming on one side of things. Then Widowmaker had its time adjusted to 10 seconds with a 10-second cooldown instead of 5 seconds with a 5-second cooldown. I'm not sure how this affects the damage of it, we'll have to look at it. If it's the same damage spread over 10 seconds or increased to compensate for the length. For the monster sets, Scourge Harvester had its damage nerfed by 30% and Thervokun had its damage increased by 22%. Then there were some bug and tick frequency fixes with Amalexi's Mercy and Vice Cannon of Venom, and a slight radius increase for Vicious Death. So as mentioned in the previous videos covering the PTS, Reliquin has been bugged and not updating as the fight goes on, so they have a fix for that and also for the skill Cutting Dive. So they said damage over time effects listed below now continuously update their damage based on your stats each tick, rather than following the standard of snapshotting their stats on application. This should fix a few issues where they were not inheriting traits such as Bloodthirsty or other changes in stats like Flawless Dawnbreaker. So I haven't had a chance to test it out yet. We'll be looking at it very soon on the PTS, but from what I've heard, Reliquin is still doing less damage than it ought to, so not sure what's going on with that. Hopefully it gets all sorted out though. And then for the last of the proc sets, Defending Warrior was nerfed by 30%. Again, really hope they consider going a bit different route with these. While I do think this week on the PTS is much better for PvP than the previous 2 weeks, it seems worse for PvE, especially for those that are not running your traditional meta builds. Okay, for the other set adjustments this patch, we will start with the Mythics. Death Dealer's Fit reduced the health, magicka, and stamina granted from this set to 88, down from 150, but increased the max stacks to 30, up from 10. So the developer comment said, previously this set didn't bring enough power to the table and had a very easy interaction case. While wanting to sell the concept of getting stronger the longer you stay in combat, the previous 20-second cap felt too low to grant really large bonuses. With this new 60-second build-up, we can reward much more resources than before, hopefully making the set more fun and impactful. And yeah, I think they did a good job with that. I think this change is pretty good. Now 2640 of each resource, but with a longer build-up. So more of an upside on one end, more of a downside on the other. The previous bonus of 1500 of each resource was okay for a one-piece item, but didn't feel quote-unquote mythic. You know, I think these items should be a bit more exciting in general, and I think this is a better place for it. 2640 of each resource is pretty good for a one-piece. Shouldn't be too hard to squeeze into setups either, especially tanking setups that have a different back bar and front bar set. Then you can still have a monster set and have this as well. So next up we have Gaze of Sithis. This one got the nerf hammer pretty hard, so they reduced the max health down to 3276 from 5000, reduced the armor granted to 4000 down from 10760, and then increased the health recovery granted to 1025 up from 500. So the dev comment on this one was, now that Battle Spirit has ingrained mitigations against stacking high health recovery in this update, we've opted to take a much more balanced approach to this set's bonuses, equalizing all three of them rather than waiting for armor and health. With this, the goal is to have the set be more balanced for builds who are using it to gain tons of survivability while ignoring the main drawback of the set, since many builds may not block frequently to begin with. So yeah, this set was pretty OP before. I think the stat values were definitely too high. Honestly, this seems like a really good set even with these reduced values. So same as before, on setups or fights where you are going to need to be blocking, it won't be used, especially for tanks, but in other situations, about the best you could ask for on a one piece for survivability. Alright, next up is the Harpooner's Waiting Kilt. Pretty big nerf to this one as well. They did increase the critical strike chance very slightly per stack to 125 up from 119, but reduced the critical damage done to 1% per stack down from 2%. This set now causes you to lose 5 stacks upon taking direct damage rather than 1, but it now also has a 1 second cooldown to help prevent losing all of your stacks in player versus player situations when getting hit by multiple attacks at once. So the dev comment on this one, this set was originally presented as don't get hit, the game. But in PvE encounters, that is the ideal gameplay to begin with. By keeping that in mind, as well as the massive difference in attack cadence between PvE and PvP, we've adjusted the rewards and the penalty of this set to help bring a tighter balance between the two with a more engaging risk of running the set in general. So my thoughts on this. I don't think they should have come at this set with a nerf from both angles. They not only took down the power, but they also took out the ease of keeping it up as well. So now at max stacks, we're looking at 10% crit damage and 5.7% crit chance, instead of 20% crit damage and 5.4% crit chance. So the bonus is still nice, especially for a one piece. I mean, it's good damage on a one piece item, but in my opinion, it's kind of fallen from that epic kind of feeling that it had before. I would have much rather seen them give it a harsher penalty, like lose all your stacks when you take direct damage, but kept the bonus the same, or maybe even increase the bonus to something like 10% crit chance and 20% crit damage to compensate. So this harsh penalty of losing all stacks would make it unusable on many fights, but on other fights, and with proper avoidance of damage, would have a huge payoff. I do think that losing one stack at a time with its original power was too easy and made it feel like a just slot it and forget it kind of item, which I don't think it should be, but now it just doesn't feel too exciting. Definitely want to hear what you guys think about this one. I'd love to see a little more risk and reward added to this to make it more situational and have those bigger payoffs. And then for the last mythic, Shapeshifter's Chains increase the health, magicka, and stamina granted from this set while transformed to 1707 up from 1206. So the dev comment here was, previously the set wasn't offering much for werewolves as the stat gain was pretty low and the cost reduction felt less impactful since your main goal with the ultimate is to never leave it to begin with. Bone Goliath and Blood Scion both receive much more effectiveness out of the cost reduction, while the max stats are less relevant since they already have large stat steroids built in. By pumping up the stat boost a little more, we can help out the pack a bit without making the tyrants even more tyrannical. Alright, nice that this got a little boost. Would still like to see a little more from it since you only get the bonus while you're transformed. It is a better direction, but feels a little too similar to the Death Dealer's Fet, I think, with it just giving another tri-stat bonus. Alright, and then for the remaining sets that were adjusted, Frostbite got a small buff up to 8% from 6% to the frost damage that it adds. So I don't think most setups will have enough frost damage to make this better than other damaging sets, but maybe for a warden using ice staves to provide brittle, should be a really nice option there. Nice to see a little more boost to that ice damage. Then Saxiel's Champion was changed to scale with duration based on your ultimate spit. So instead of 21 seconds with any ultimate cost, you need to spend 315 ult to match the previous duration. So 150 ult for 10 seconds, 300 ult for 20 seconds, 450 ult for 30 seconds. I'll be honest, I don't really like this. We already have other sets that scale with ult spent from Halls of Fabrication, and I'd like to just see something different here. It just feels a little meh. I mean, it seems like it's pretty good if used properly, but would like to see a little different twist put on it rather than defaulting back to the ult cost scaling that we've already seen before. So for the ability adjustments for Necromancers, they just did a fix to Braided Tether since it was healing the caster twice per tick. And then the Sturdy Horn morph of Warhorn got a buff up to 1320 crit resistance, and they fixed a bug with it where it could be stacked up higher than that. And that pretty much wraps up the combat changes for week 3. Not all bad stuff here, but I definitely ended reading the patch notes for this week feeling a little worse than when I started reading them. Not that some stuff in here isn't in a better place even, just feels a lot less exciting to me. The mental gears were spinning after reading the week 1 patch notes and thinking about the different possibilities and the emergence of better use of proc sets for PvE, but now it's like they're reining it all back in and, for a lack of a better word, just feels a little boring. So I'd love to see a different approach to proc sets that keeps them from overperforming in PvP, but also makes them fun to use in PvE. And then the mythics, I want them to feel legendary and not like slightly better than usual stat sticks. Anyways, those are my thoughts on the current changes. I definitely don't mean to be doom and gloom. I actually think this is going to be a really good patch coming up. I just think a lot of this stuff could be even better, and I'd love to see it get there. As always, a big thanks to my current Patreon supporters. If you'd like to see how you can help support the channel, I'll have a link down in the description below. And a special thanks to Nicholas, Simon, Privy League Guild on PlayStation's EU server, and Cougar is Bay in the Cougar Town Guild. Thank you so much for stopping by. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.